Well, there we are. I see our faces. That's always a win. Good morning. I can say morning to you because you're an hour behind me in the mountain time
Right.
zone.
Still morning.
Still morning for Craig. It's technically afternoon for me, although I think based on it now being daylight saving time, I believe our website was a little off in terms of what time we were actually meeting. That's the beauty of doing offsets from time instead of defining an actual time zone. So it is summertime here, I guess, for us, as we would phrase it in other countries. But hello, Craig. How are you today, my friend?
I am good. And you?
I can't complain. I really can't complain because I have no snow on the ground, unlike you. How's your back feeling? I know you guys have gotten about
Uh,
14 feet of snow in the last 72
uh,
hours. What's been going on?
give or take. No, it's like last weekend. Last weekend we got an enormous snowstorm. And by enormous, it's not Minnesota standard enormous, but
Well,
a
my
lot for
understanding
me.
is it was the fourth largest snowfall y'all have had, so
Well,
it's nothing to sneeze at.
I didn't hear that, but it's definitely like it was around 2 feet of snow and deeper in some
That
spots. And I
that's legit.
shoveled, yeah, between me and others in our household, we shoveled lots of snow and cleared our driveway, cleared the sidewalks in front of it, the house and everything. And it killed me. And I had to go outside and check these pipes that come out of our house that apparently
Yep.
are exhaust for the heater or something
Yep.
to make sure they're not blocked. And they're pretty safe, but I went out there to kind of dig them out anyway. And
Smart.
I dug out about probably 10 cubic feet of snow, just this hole, just so it could fill in and it'd be fine. I dug out about 10 cubic feet of snow. I turned around to go back in the house, and I know I hadn't even taken a step yet. I turned around, and about 10 cubic feet of snow fell off the roof on top of me
Yep.
and then into the hole that I
Yep.
just dug, filling in the hole. So I had to dig it out again. And that was last weekend.
It's
And
fun.
then, yeah, it was fun. And then this week it was a little warmer. In fact, on Saturday it was like in the upper 60s, almost 70s, and most of the snow, except for the deeper parts, had pretty much melted away. And then yesterday, around 2 or 3 o'clock, it started snowing. And I'm
Fantastic.
looking out my window now, and I'm guessing 6 to 10 inches.
And
So
and the beauty of late spring snow for any of our viewers who live in warmer climates is it's wet snow, which means it's heavy snow. Like that colder snow is not so bad. It's more like a powder. It's relatively
you
light.
could just walk
Oh
outside and just
yeah,
exhale, and your driveway is clear.
yeah. I mean, we had a couple snowfalls this year. I could literally just brush it off. You just take your broom and just brush it right off.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen in March and April. This snow
No,
just heart attack snow, I believe they call this stuff. So
yeah, you take your show shovel, scoop some up, and then you start to pick it up, and you realize I am not strong enough to do that.
right, right. You have to work at small shovelfuls. I have I've certainly stalled snowblowers in that kind of snow because it's so wet that the snowblowers just kind of give up and tap out. It doesn't matter how brawny your snowblower is, unless it's attached to a dump truck or something, then you're pretty much SOL. But such is life.
Right.
So, well, I'm sure we could talk about the weather, but for those people who don't know your background, and I'd be a little surprised if our viewers were completely unaware of you, but what is your background? What's your bio? How'd you get where you are today? And then we'll dive into other topics from there.
Let's see. That's a tough one. I started off as a VIC-20 programmer, and then a Commodore 64 programmer,
Oh yes,
and that was fun. In fact, I wrote some pretty cool stuff on a Commodore 64. I remember the days when you go buy magazines. Remember,
yes,
first off, I remember when you would buy magazines. Let's just start there.
right,
But
right.
then
That's a good
I would
starting
buy,
point. Do you remember magazines?
yeah,
It's
so
like the internet only printed out.
I'd buy the Ahoy and Computes Gazette magazines, and I would take them home. And for hours, I would sit there just typing in whatever they had. And when it was in BASIC, I at least understood what was going on. But a lot of times, a lot of the good ones were not written in BASIC; they were written in assembly or machine code. And so you would end up typing in as a bunch of hex values. And thank goodness when they finally came up with a kind of a little tool to help you make sure you were not mistyping that stuff, because it'd take hours. You type that in, but then you have this really cool game, right?
Right.
And so that's where I started. But then I, um, ended up moving on and went to college, got a computer science degree, which is a great organization, great group, great computer science program they had. But at the end of the day, I don't use any of that stuff I learned. It is
Yeah,
more
I
about
agree.
algorithms and theoretical stuff than it was, which is useful, but those are
Right.
behind libraries now.
Right.
And ended up doing software development. I started off on a project where I was going to be a C programmer, and I was so excited. And a week into it, they said, "Well, we're not doing that project anymore. Do you know COBOL?" And
Oh
I'm like,
God. Yeah.
I said no, and they said, "Would you like to learn it?" I said,
Not really.
"It's my first week on the job, I guess so." But I ended up not having to actually do that project either. I ended up doing a little bit of C and something else, and then I got into Java, and I started programming in Java when it was not even. I think it was 1.0.2. I
Okay.
think. I mean, I wrote some applets.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Been
proud to
there, done
say,
that.
and rest is history. I started. I wrote all sorts of interesting crap in Java to start with, and then a friend of mine, a coworker of mine, introduced me to Spring, and this was when it was like 0.9, and took it from there. And so wrote a book about it, and wrote several editions of a book about it.
And so I
And
have one of the editions right here next to me on my
yes, that
on my
is one of them.
stack. So I think this is the fourth edition. So
Yeah,
I know I'm
there's
at
a
least one behind, aren't I?
well, there's a fifth edition, and I'm trying desperately to wrap up a sixth edition as soon as I can. I literally have like little things to do, but they're like little things that are such a beating to me. And sometimes either I'm struggling to get, the words around it, or struggling to get my head around what I'm trying to do. And writing books not as easy as it sounds. I mean,
No.
it seems like you write some code, you write some prose around the code, you ship it, right? No, you realize pretty quickly it's not that easy. You have to
Right.
you want to think through what you're doing. And the funny thing is no matter how much effort you put into it, no matter how hard you work on it, somebody's going to say this sucks. And yeah, so it's not a very rewarding thing to do, but I still do it.
Well, one of our mutual friends, one of your neighbors, actually, Dr. Venkat Subramaniam, makes writing books look a lot easier than it actually is. So he's
Yeah, I'm pretty
remarkably
sure.
lifelike.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's just nothing but a big AI engine.
I think so.
Uh,
I think it's a little known fact. Westworld is at least partially based off of Venkat, or at least the
yeah,
technology, that Venkat embodies. So at least that's my theory. That's my theory.
yeah.
But so tell me a little more about Spring, how you got involved in Spring. Clearly you've been in that ecosystem a very long time. What was it about Spring that kind of spoke to you and kind of hooked you to the point where, I mean, that's that's been your area for a long time now.
Yeah, when I first, I mean, I was so tired back in the day. Like I think you were in the conversation you had with Mark Richards a few weeks ago. Mark pretty much said it is at a time when every time you wake up, there's a whole brand new web
Yes.
framework out there, and in fact. Not only was there a new one, it seems like every morning, but the project I was on, we created our own
Of
because
course.
why not? And that was perfectly okay because at the time there wasn't that many great choices. I mean, Struts was there and WebWork was there, but and I just struggled with that a lot. Plus, I struggled a little bit with writing reasonably well factored code, and it's just I felt like I was a Java developer, but I wasn't a very good one. I
Sure.
felt like everything I did worked, but I didn't feel good about it. And so again, a coworker said, "Hey, have you heard of Spring?" Well, he sat and talked about it. He tried to explain to me dependency injection and all this, and I don't know why, but it just at first it didn't resonate with me. I'm like,
Sure.
"This sounds complicated." And he says, "No, it's like," and he's described it again. I'm like, I think what the problem was is I was expecting something complicated, and he's explaining something simple, and so I didn't understand how that could be so. And once I realized, oh, that's all there is to it. He goes, yes, that's all there is to it. I'm like, oh, got it. Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
And so I dug into it and I realized I really liked the way that Spring had structured itself, not just as a web framework. In fact, the first version of Spring and BC kind of sucked, really. I mean, it did its job, but it really wasn't that great. I love what they have now, but the whole idea of loose coupling and dependency injection and the AOP bits and all that, that just really resonated with me in a way because I had also spent some time prior to that on an EJB project and I hated my life
I can
because of
completely
it.
understand.
And so it was really nice to be able to achieve some of the same things with so much less ceremony. And so and then once I was into it, then it became a matter of it's not just about transactions and dependency injection and web frameworks and all that. It's, Spring exists to make Java developers' lives easier.
Right.
And and it didn't just do that with the things it set out to do in the first place. It did that with new things as they came along. So we're looking at now reactive programming. We're talking about deploying to Kubernetes. We're talking about cloud native applications, and Spring fits it fits into those worlds as well. And so the idea that it just didn't solve one problem and then walk away, it solves new problems as they come along as well.
Right.
And that really appealed to me.
It's funny you mentioned writing your own framework. There was a period in the Java ecosystem where it's like if you didn't write your own framework, you weren't even doing Java, man.
Right.
I very distinctly remember being on this one web project where I want to say JSPs were like zero point 0.9 or something. They hadn't gone 1.0 yet. And we were struggling with writing servlets, pumping out all that HTML. And so we created what amounts to our own JSPs. And what was hilarious is our manager wouldn't okay us using JSPs yet because they weren't 1.0, but he was perfectly fine with us building a framework that was essentially us trying to write JSPs. And it's like, sure, that makes perfect sense. We'll write it instead of using the standard, but yeah, what could possibly go wrong? So,
I've
it's
seen the
good times.
same. I've seen the same argument in the past. No, you can't use this well-supported and well
Right.
produced
Right.
open source project because it's open source project. If it's open source, it's free, and if it's free, it must be crap. So instead, why don't you and a couple of other developers write
Write
something
your
that's
own.
equivalent to it? I'm like,
Yes, exactly.
it's not supported.
Yep.
Who knows if it works?
Right.
And
Right.
we can do our best, but you never know. And so it's just the logic behind that was just so flawed.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a common one. It's hilarious to me how that works. But all right, so we have a commenter from Winnipeg. This is someone who knows very much what it's like to be in the cold and the snow. The terms Colorado low and Alberta clipper usually invoke senses of dread in Winnipeg. Yeah, that's a good point. They don't call an Alberta clipper for nothing. And yeah, I hear where you're coming from. It's definitely part of living in this part of the world when you where the snow happens. And do you remember Byte magazine? Did you ever?
I do.
I
I didn't I didn't
subscribed.
pick
I
it
know
up that
that.
often, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm quite certain I subscribed to that as memory serves. So yeah, I can 100% relate to that and going through there to learn how to program something. It's funny
Yeah.
how that works.
Well, what was frustrating a little bit about some of the magazines like Byte or even the Standard Compute magazine, not Compute's Gazette, but the Standard Compute magazine is, they tried to appeal to everybody, no matter what kind of computer you were working with. And I had a Commodore 64. And so when I would see listings for an Apple IIe or some code listing for a PC, I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to like make heads or tails of this. I'm like, okay, is there any way I could convert this?
Right.
In some cases you could, but for the really cool stuff you couldn't. And so it
Yeah.
was kind of frustrating to even open those magazines sometimes for that
Right.
reason.
Right. Now we've been kind of dancing around this, but you were based now in Colorado. How did you end up there? I know you moved from the great state of Texas. What drew
Well,
you to the mountains of Colorado?
the only reason I was even in Texas was because that's
The
where my first
barbecue.
job out of college was.
Oh, okay.
Well, and then once I got there, yeah, barbecue and Tex-Mex and things like that. But no, I grew up in New Mexico and went to New Mexico State University. I graduated there, and upon graduation, I had two different job offers, both with telecom companies whose, at least in name, no longer exist anymore. So
Right.
I won't mention them, but you probably at one time back then received a phone call asking if you were happy with your long distance service from them.
Yep.
Um, and it came down to one was in Denver, one was in Texas, and I really liked the Denver one, but the Texas one paid better,
There you go.
and so that's what I went with, and it was great. I enjoyed. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Texas heat. There's a lot of things about Texas I don't like, but as you kind of pointed out, the food there is good. It's very difficult to find bad food there.
Yes.
I've learned from experience that even though I'm not a particularly big fan of country western music, the places that play country western music usually have really good food,
Mm-hmm.
as kind of a rule of thumb. And that's where I ultimately met my wife, and so that worked out. I'm glad I went to Texas for that. But now that I've done that, now that I've had the whole Texas experience, um, I always wanted to live in Colorado anyway. I preferred living here anyway. I just couldn't initially, and we had friends who also we had met in Texas, and they moved here. And I remember The day they were at our house telling us goodbye and driving off to drive to Colorado, I turned my wife, my daughters, they're both, crying because they were just really close friends. And I looked at them and said, "Are we ready to move to Colorado now?" And they said yes. And so about a year later, we started taking steps to do that. Those same people, they as soon as we were here a year, they moved to Georgia. How dare they?
Well,
But we've slapped them around and convinced
sure.
them, and they're now back in Colorado. In fact, they're waiting for their house to be built, so they're actually living in our house at the moment. So
Nice.
that's how close we are. Is we're nice enough to let them stay until their house is finished. So
So, how did your family react to snow? Because that's got to be a bit of a change to go from Texas heat to Colorado snow. I mean, modulo the downpour you've gotten here in the last few days with these spring storms, but what was that like?
I mean, we love it. I mean, it's definitely we're all very much more keen on cooler weather
Sure,
than hotter weather. Nobody disagrees with that,
sure,
and we like the way it looks. It's very pretty. I
it
think
is.
the only thing we don't like about it is today. For example, today was the very first day in a year that everybody is able to go back to in-person learning full time at school, and we were afraid they were going to have a snow day. We're like, no, 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 no. I would rather it not snow
Right, right.
and them go. They need to go back. I
Yeah.
think, and that I'm not just me. I'm talking about my daughters as well. No, no, we need to go back.
Mm.
We're done being home. And so we were afraid there was going to be a snow day, but it turned out they were only delayed for an hour and a half, and everything worked out.
See, the system works. Yeah, I'm very curious to see after a year of remote school, to some extent or the other. Are we going to have snow days in the future, or is it just going to be school from home when the snow, for those of us that live in colder climates, sorry, you're just going to have school from home? I don't know. I'm very curious to see
I
what
don't
that
know.
looks like.
I think they need snow days. I think
I
that's
think
still
so
very
too.
much part of the growing up
Agreed.
experience. But I do know that my oldest, her high school has already declared we've burned through all of our snow days already,
Really?
and so they're saying if we do have a quote unquote snow day, it's just going to be remote. We're
Okay,
still going to have class. We're just going
sure.
to do it remotely.
Well, this was probably 4 years ago. I can't remember the exact year. Maybe it was five now. I know time has no meaning in a pandemic. But we had school canceled because of the cold. Because at certain wind chills, you just can't have kids waiting for the bus outside. They'll lose an
Right.
ear. And so we had school closed because of that. And we were in the same situation where we got into kind of that March timeframe, and it was like, we don't have extra days. So in fact, I think they may even have taken a day off of spring break to help equalize things. But yeah, it's fascinating how that all plays out. But
Yeah, even with the remote learning, they still had the reason we burned through the snow days is because they just couldn't the teachers themselves couldn't get to wherever they weren't the teachers weren't at home, they were
right,
actually still in the classroom and basically as a production studio for remote
yep,
learning, and they couldn't get to that, and so now they've taken some steps so that the teachers are at home if they need to be and they can do teaching from home. So
sure,
but we initially, yeah, they burned through the snow days even though they were remote because there was no other option.
right, right. Now, in addition to being a spring expert, you know an awful lot about Disney, and so
A little bit.
we're gonna spend some time chatting about that. I wore this just for you,
And I have
just for
my
you.
own. It's under my jacket. Otherwise, I showed you. But I have my own Mickey shirt on
Of
today as
course,
well.
of course. And I think I've long since learned. Unfortunately, I have not seen you in person since probably Dev Nexus last year would have been the last time I got to see you in person. But I just am in this habit now of whenever I run into you of asking either when was your last trip to Disney or when was your first trip or when's your next trip to Disney. How did you get into the Disney space? What is it about Disney that draws you in to the point where I couldn't even count how many times you've been to the parks?
Yeah, I don't even know if I could count it off the top of my head. But yeah, before I answer your initial question, and we've even run into each other in
We
Disneyland.
have. Yes,
Yes.
that's right. I forgot about that.
Yes.
We didn't do that deliberately. We ran into you by the I think where we get like the apple drink or something
Yes.
by the
The
castle.
boysen apple
Yes, that was
drink.
one of your recommendations.
I love that thing. But yeah, the way I got into it, I mean, I first off, I generally enjoy good animation, good cartoons. Just
Yep.
I've been a fan of like Looney Tunes, the original Looney Tunes for years. PC or not. I'm a fan of them, and fan of, when I was in college, Animaniacs, and thankfully
Yes.
those are back now.
Yes.
That's awesome. And Disney, I enjoyed not so much the modern Disney as much, but
Hmm.
the retro, the old school, Mickey's Trailer and the Lonesome Ghosts thing, and those old cartoons. I thought those were brilliant. And but I never was a huge fan of Disney
Hmm.
until when we got married. I asked my wife. I said, "Well, where do you want to go on our honeymoon?" And she has always wanted to go to Disney World. I'm like, "Okay, consider it done." And so we went to Disney World. And like most people who go to Disney World, their first time, we did it wrong.
Okay.
And it's a complicated. It's much bigger than you think it is.
Yes.
It's not Six Flags with Mickey Mouse. It's a big place. And but we went and we had a good time. It was a lot of fun. And I remember distinctly there was something special about it. I couldn't put my finger on it right away, but on our very last day, in fact, the last thing we did right before we went back to the airport to leave, we went to Hollywood Studios. We rode the Tower of Terror, which I love, and it wasn't our first time riding. We'd ridden it a couple times before that, but I remember on that particular moment, it's like, wait a minute, I think I get it now. There's a story being told here,
Yeah.
and I'm in it. I'm
Hmm.
part of it. I'm experiencing this. And not all Disney attractions are like that, but a good chunk of them are.
Hmm.
There's a story being told, and I'm in it. And that's especially true. I haven't got a chance to write it yet, thanks COVID, but I haven't got a chance to write it. But the new Rise of Resistance
Yeah.
attraction at the Star Wars in the Star Wars land, I've seen videos of it, and I know more or less what happens. Very much. There's a ride. There's a story being told here, and you're part of it.
Hmm.
And I love that idea. I love that whole immersive. You get immersed into this story. You get immersed into this atmosphere for maybe 5 to 15 minutes at a time, and nothing else matters at
Yep.
that point. When you're on the Tower of Terror, you are in a haunted hotel that the elevator apparently plummets and brings you to your death. That's awesome, and nothing else matters. And Rise of the Resistance, you are trying to escape Batu, but the you get pulled aboard, and the dark side, now you're a prisoner, and now you're escaping. These are all just, you're part of this story, and I love that idea.
Well, I know before the last time I went, which was pre-pandemic, my family and I went to Disneyland, and I sent you an email. I'm like, all right, well, how should we do it? What should we do? What should we look for? And you gave us a lot of great advice. The one that stood out to me was the animation studio, learning how to
Oh
draw the
yeah.
characters. I was amazed at how much fun that was, and I never would have done that had I not gotten that bit of advice from you. And it's kind of amazing how they're like, all right, just draw a circle and make it a little bigger, let your wrist be free, and then do a little of this. And oh, look, it's Olaf. And it's like,
Right.
wow, I actually kind of have a passable Olaf right here. It, what
I have a
else?
stack of those on the shelf over here. I
I
could
know you
unroll them and
do.
show you, but
What are what are two or three things that you're like people don't realize this is there and it's so cool, it's so much fun. What are the things that you recommend or that you really love to do when you're in the parks?
yeah, I mean, first off, that's a really good one. That's especially
Yes.
good in the summer because it's
Yes.
also air conditioned.
Yep.
Um, and it's a great way to just take a moment, rest your feet, sit down for a moment, and do something kind of creative and cool. And we actually go to out of our way when we're there to go look at the schedule. They have the little schedule
Yep.
outside to tell you what character you're going to be drawing at which times, and we kind of plan our day around that schedule sometimes.
Sure.
And what do we want to draw today? Do we want to draw Olaf? No, not so much. But maybe oh, we're going to draw Oswald. Oswald's cool. Let's go draw Oswald, and plan everything else around that.
Yep.
So it's kind of fun. Um, but other things, I mean, I definitely get into like the hidden details,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all over the place. And some I'm confident I don't even know all of them, and I know a lot of them, but I
Right.
definitely like in the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, if you're ever over by where the Rapunzel themed restrooms are, it's the strangest choice to theme restrooms after Rapunzel. But okay, there's Rapunzel themed restrooms, and if you're walking around out there, the first thing you want to do is look down and walk around and kind of look at your feet, because what you're going to see are imprints of horseshoes, because apparently horses have walked through there and left their prints. But specifically, there's a there's special horseshoes, and they're labeled with the wearer of those horseshoes, and it's Maximus from Tangled. It's his horseshoe. Just that little detail just stamped
Yeah.
into the concrete is so cool. In that same area, there's a little kind of a water feature type thing, and if you look around and start looking really close, there's Pascal, the lizard, the chameleon. He's hidden. You see, find his friend. Well, it's really his friends, but they're hidden throughout that area. You just have to look for them.
Yep.
I love looking for hidden Mickeys. My favorite hidden Mickey, hands down. It took me forever to see it. I knew it was there, but I couldn't see it for the longest time. But now that I've seen it,
Can't
you
unsee
can't
it.
unsee it. Right. If you ride in the same park, if you're riding the Little Mermaid ride, as you're exiting, if you look off to your right, there's this cluster of rocks, and if you're not looking at it just right, it's just a bunch of rocks, and they spread out over probably 10, 15 feet. But if you line up just right with them, all the rocks sort of just come together, and there's Mickey Mouse as he would have appeared in Steamboat Willie. And you
Wow.
have to stand in pretty much
Just the
exactly
right
the right spot
place.
to see it.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's just rocks.
Sure. Well, I've always been amazed at how good they are at queue management. I distinctly remember going through the line for Peter Pan, and they have a whole game you can play while you're in line,
Yeah,
and look
that's
for this,
relatively
look
new.
for that. Yeah, and that kind of stuff I think is again really imaginative and something I wish more places would take into account. They do a fantastic job of making the line seem shorter than it really is. Giving you something to do as you go along. But yeah,
They've recently given you, there's an app you can get. I can't remember, Play Disney or something. I can't remember what it's called, but there's an app you can get for your phone. And while you're in line, there's games you can play that only make sense when you're in line
yep.
for a certain ride.
Yeah, well, I know
Just
when we were there, we did the Star Wars stuff multiple times. The pilot the Falcon, and there were all these codes all over the line that you could snap with your phone, and there was a whole set of things you could do inside that part of the park that kept my son and I engaged for more hours than I care to admit. But it's you'd have to go through that line a lot to find all of them, because some of them, if the line's moving, you're like, oh, I gotta snap that, oh, I need to, and it's a bit of a challenge, and you got to spot them all. But yeah, it's really quite well done how they do all that.
yeah.
But so how have you been surviving the pandemic? What have you been streaming? What's helping you get through these hopefully we're on the downward slope now. We'll all get
Yes.
vaccinated here over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks and return to some degree of normalcy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to say that I've been streaming a lot of TV shows, but the truth is, I actually, at the beginning of the whole lockdown, I made a list. I still have it on my phone of all the shows I want to watch. And I realized pretty quickly that I could basically quit my job and do nothing but watch these shows and probably
Right.
never still finish them in my
No.
life. There's just
No.
so many things I'd like to watch, and then they keep adding new
Yes,
shows to
they
the
do.
list. Um, and I realized pretty quickly that I actually watched shows more frequently before the pandemic because
Oh,
I was on the road. I was in an
right.
airplane, and sometimes I would work on a plane, sometimes I'd work in the hotels. But if I'm, sometimes I wouldn't.
Yep.
And I was able to keep up with a lot of shows pretty easily when I was traveling, but not so easily when I'm at home.
Sure.
But yeah, I've been, watching a variety of shows. I do recommend it. It's been a couple of years. In fact, it was pre-pandemic when I watched it. But if you've not seen it, there's two shows that just caught my attention like nothing else. First off, Sherlock was
Okay.
brilliant, freaking brilliant. And then Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events, not the movie with Jim Carrey, but the other one.
Oh,
It was easily one of the most fun shows I've ever watched, and especially the first couple of seasons.
sure.
So I highly recommend those. But I I've been writing books, and so that's keeping me busy more than I more so that I can't watch the shows
Right.
because
Right.
I'm too busy doing that. We've done a lot of we do, well, this. I play a lot of tabletop board games, card games.
Yep.
So I've done a lot of that. Um, let's
Yeah, you're
see.
you're the reason I have to play Carcassonne like every night before I go to bed on my
Oh,
iPad. I play like 2 or 3 games of that thanks to you. So thanks.
yeah, Carcassonne, Isle of Skye. That's another one that's great to play. Oh, Splendor. Splendor is fun to play on the iPad. It's
Nice.
great to play in person too, but on
Sure.
the iPad, it's pretty decent. Um,
Well, the advantage
yeah,
of the
we've
iPad is it just sets itself up. Like it's a lot easier to play, a game of Catan on your iPad than get
right,
everything out of the box, get it all lined up. That's we
right.
we did a fair amount of that, but the amount of prep of getting the board set up can be a small impediment to actually playing a full round. But
Right. And then more recently, my wife's always been into this, and I've enjoyed doing it. It's not really something I just seek out to do, but she enjoys putting together jigsaw puzzles.
Oh, sure.
And over our many trips to Disney, we have a huge collection
I bet you
of
do.
Disney, and not just like, not the cartoony. It's not like it's just something they pull out of a cartoon and made a jigsaw puzzle out of, but really nice.
Hmm.
Like you want to frame. In fact, we have framed them. You want to
Nice.
frame that. They're very nice art, but with Disney themes around them. If you want to Google them, the signature series
Okay.
puzzles. They're really nice. But we've been putting those together, and there's one in particular we did a few weeks ago. It took freaking forever. It was the hardest puzzle I've ever done because like every piece seemed like to fit with each other, but it didn't go there, that kind of thing. But we've enjoyed doing that and spending some time doing that. But yeah, board games, puzzles, and occasionally watching TV.
Sure. I'd love to do puzzles more often, except I have two cats, and
Yes.
wherever we would put the puzzle would be someplace the cats could also get at them, and it doesn't end well.
Yeah, we
So,
have one of our dogs is big enough that she can get up to the table, and she hasn't done it in this round of puzzle working, but a few years ago, we had started putting together a puzzle, and she ate pieces. She got to the pieces and just pulled them off the table and ate them.
yep.
We're pretty much protective of it now. So if we
Sure.
walk away from we eat at one table, but we have our dining room table where we're doing puzzles, and so we're protective and put a guard around everything so the dogs can get to it. But we were sitting there doing the puzzle the other day, and my youngest, she has a bearded dragon, and she was sitting there at the table watching it. She wasn't really participating in the puzzle working, but she was holding her bearded dragon, and all of a sudden he decided to shoot across the table, and when that happened, puzzle pieces went everywhere.
Everywhere. We have this little tabletop beanbag toss game, like the one you do in your backyard where you throw the bag into the hole and put it on the board, whatever. I call it. Some people call it cornhole, some people call it bag, whatever. So we
That's
have
the
this little.
official name. There's actually a professional cornhole. You can watch it
I
on like one
know.
of the ESPNs.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I was on a plane back in the before times, flipping around on the channels in the seatback entertainment, and came upon ESPN, and professional cornhole was on, and I just had that moment of like pause, where I'm like, huh, okay then. I
We
actually
had
took a picture
exactly
of
that
it and
moment.
like sent it to my buddy, and I'm like, who knew this was a professional sport as well? And to be fair, I watched for about 5 minutes. They just get it in the hole every time. I mean, it's just ridiculous how accurate these guys are. And I mean, I'm happy if I hit the board, and if it goes through the hole, I'm like, oh, cool. Obviously, any of these things, there's technique, there's practice it, you figure it out. But we have this little mini version of it where you kind of pull down a little lever and it flings it. The cats are really interested in that one, so we
Oh,
have
I'm
to be
sure.
very careful when we're doing that. That either we shut the door so the cats can't get to where that lives, or everybody has to be on guard because they're clearly like timing it, and they'll make a run, and you gotta like guard it because they would just eat it, and then you're like, oh great. So it's good times. It's good times. Oh,
Yeah, we
pets
had that
are
exact
fun.
Yeah, we had that exact moment a few months ago. It was like right before Christmas. I think we were just flipping through the channels and suddenly there's, professional cornhole on.
Right.
And I'm like, and all of us, everybody in the room's like, really?
Yep.
And then we couldn't turn it. We couldn't
Right.
change the channel. We were incapable of changing the channel because we had to
Yes.
watch this.
Yes. It's like you just are like, I had no idea. It who knew this was a thing? So yeah, there's sports for all of us, I guess is the way to phrase it. But it does remind me, I actually need to order a good set of cornhole boards. I don't know, bag boards, whatever it is, because the one we have is fairly cheap, and I think this summer clearly we're gonna have time. We're not going anywhere, so have to invest finally in a decent set. But that's a future problem. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but let me ask anyway. Once everybody's vaccinated, you go on vacation again. Where are you gonna head? What's your favorite vacation spot?
Well, I'm hoping it's Disneyland, not Disney World, but Disneyland. I kind of am. I enjoy it a little bit more. It's smaller.
Okay,
It actually has more stuff to do, strangely enough, even though
huh.
it's smaller. But I like the history of it there.
Sure,
Walt actually walked there, kind of stuff, and
sure,
there's just a lot of things about it I like more. But I'm hoping it's there. The problem is it opens on April 30th for California residents.
oh sure,
And as much as I love Disneyland, I am not willing to move to California for that. So just wait for them to open it for everybody else.
sure. Yeah, it was remarkable. We spent I don't know, 3 or 4 days there, overlapping briefly with you last December, 2 Decembers ago, whatever it was. And I was really amazed at how many things there are inside that park. And to your point, I think it's a little more approachable because you're not, it feels like at Disney World, you spend a lot more time on the bus going between things if you're
Yeah.
really trying to do the
Well,
park hopper.
yeah, don't do the park hopper there unless, I mean, especially if you have less than 4 days there, don't do the park hopper.
Yeah.
That's just a waste of time. You're going to spend more time on the bus. If you're going to spend, we've had 8 to 10 day trips before. On those
Mm.
days, yeah, some days you might hop back and forth, but if you're in a relatively short trip, yeah, waste of time on the bus.
What's the first thing you're going to eat next time you go to Disneyland? What's the food that,
For snack or meal?
how about both? Let's start with the snack because, a lot of times you maybe grab a snack on the way
Oh,
in.
that's
What,
easy.
yeah.
Churro.
Okay. All right.
And
I've
mostly because it's easy to find too. I know
fair
exactly
point.
where the churro stand is in Frontierland. It's right there,
Sure.
right across from Big Thunder Mountain, right there. I know exactly where that's at.
We did
Um,
actually make the Disney churros at some point over pandemic, and I actually made the beignets
oh yeah,
right before Lent, I think, whatever that was. So
but yeah, the churro, and then shortly thereafter a Dole Whip. You have to
oh
have a Dole
yeah,
Whip. The
yeah.
problem is in Disneyland, the line for the Dole Whip's insane.
I think you
Uh,
could. Can you order it online now as you walk around? Is that in the
yeah,
app?
maybe, but there is a trick to that. The Dole Whip stand in Disneyland has two sides. One
Mm,
side is the common side. The other
mm,
side is like at the waiting area to go inside of the tiki room.
sure,
Yeah, just go to the tiki room
sure.
and go in there. Order your Dole Whip, and you can take it inside. They'll let you take it inside while you're enjoying the birds singing. You can take it in with you. So totally worth it. But yeah, as far as meal, yeah, there's a lot of things that are great there. But the my go-to, I love eating it. Cafe Orleans and
Mm-hmm.
getting the big as your face Monte Cristo. It's the perfect meal. It's like fair food. It's like, bread, meat, cheese,
Yep.
powdered sugar. It's fried.
Yep.
You get to dip it in jam. I mean, what is wrong with this? There's not a
Right.
thing wrong with it.
Right. Yeah, there's plenty of good stuff to eat while you're wandering around. That's for sure. Yeah, it was. I'm fairly confident we're gonna make a pilgrimage maybe over Christmas again. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't had that conversation with the family yet, but I get the feeling there's a desire, to do that again. We had a lot of fun there. It's
If
beautiful in the holidays. It's
Oh,
very cool
totally,
to
yeah.
see it all. All the decorations and everything, and you can get the candy cane if you get in line at
Oh
the right
yeah.
time. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's good stuff.
we've made it. Last time we were there was December 2019,
Yeah,
and that was the trip that it was sort of impromptu. We sort of did it at the last minute because we realized we weren't going anywhere. We were just going to be stuck at home over the
yep,
holidays. Nobody didn't have friends here, didn't have family here, and we decided rather than be bored, let's just go to Disneyland. And it was like literally we made the plans about a week or week and a half and decided to go, and totally worth it. We were there on Christmas Day. It was awesome.
yeah. That's awesome.
Um, it's totally awesome, and we decided then that that's going to become a yearly tradition. And then COVID happened, so we've already broken it once.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, it will, if Disneyland will in California, the state of California will let us, we will be there December 2021.
Awesome, awesome. That's fantastic. So we talked a bit about this, and eventually we'll get on the road again, I assume. When you're in a hotel and you're flipping around, other than cornhole, professional cornhole, is there a movie or TV show that if it hits, you're like, all right, I'm in. Yeah, I'm
Uh,
watching this to the end now. I'm stuck.
yeah, you had to ask me an embarrassing question.
You can
Um,
say whatever you want.
yeah,
You're not
I
under oath.
there's two shows that really have caught my attention when I'm traveling. I mean,
I
I
only
try my
watch
best.
Masterpiece Theater.
Oh, I try my best if I am going to watch TV. I try my best to watch some streaming show that I need to catch up on.
Sure.
But and like I said, the list of those is long. But if I don't want to mess with that, if I don't want to, I just want to have something on, but I don't necessarily want to focus on it. There's two shows that have really caught my attention traveling, and I've pretty much not watched them any other time except when I'm traveling. Is the first one is the least embarrassing of the two. Is the was it gosh, Expedition Unknown? Is that what it's called? I can't
I'm
remember
not
the name
sure.
of it now.
Okay.
Has this guy Josh Gates, who's the
Okay.
host, and the idea, the thinking of it is that he goes to these places. He tries to like find, evidence of Amelia Earhart's, where she crashed,
Oh, sure.
or try to find some hidden treasure or whatever. And then in doing so, they hit several different locations, and you learn the history of those locations. And it's just interesting show to watch. And now that I have Discovery Plus, I've actually I said don't watch it unless I travel, but I have watched a couple on Discovery
Sure.
Plus, and I have the entire catalog there to get to watch if I want to. The other one is a little bit more embarrassing. Just to be clear, it's not that I necessarily believe in this. I just find it fascinating to watch. Ghost Adventures on the Travel
Oh,
Channel.
yeah.
Those are fun, mostly because it's all the same stuff every time.
Right.
And some little blurb will go across the screen, go, oh, that's what they call an orb manifestation. And let me show you why this can't be dust, or why this can't be a bug. I'm like, because bugs don't fly that way. I'm like, the heck you say, they sure do. Uh,
Right.
I've seen them. And dust will fly, typically flies in a kind of a straight line, unless there's an air current.
Right.
Then it might switch. So yeah, I'm not sure I buy into it, but the idea that there's this one guy, I don't think he's on the show anymore, but he used to be on there. And my favorite part is he would hear a sound, or there'd be something. He would, you could almost make a drinking game out of it. He would go, look that on camera every time.
Yep. Yep. It was just his catchphrase.
Yeah.
See, I mean, I'm with you. I love the long arc drama stuff, but sometimes when you're traveling, you can't keep with that consistency long enough where you're like, I don't know where the storyline is because it's been 3 weeks. And so having something like that that's more bite size and doesn't matter what one you bump into, it's going to entertain you for 45 minutes. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that at
Yeah.
all. But yeah, it is fascinating to me to see that sort of change in how we've consumed media. You and I are old enough to remember these things called network television schedules,
Yeah.
and
There
it
were three
occurs
channels.
right, and you could watch Friends at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever it was, on Thursdays, and that's when it was. And if you missed one, you had to wait for summer reruns, or hopefully maybe your friend recorded it. I actually, at one point, when we switched to satellite, we had an East Coast and a West Coast feed of the local channels. And so if you missed the East Coast airing, you could just wait and watch the West Coast airing. But having now grown up in this era that our children are growing up in, where I just tap a button and basically whatever I want to watch is streaming, I got to tell you, I kind of prefer the streaming.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to be able to watch 3, 4, 5 episodes and stay in that arc and remember who all the characters are and what the storylines are, as opposed to it being, who's that, what's this character again, and why are they mad at each other, and then you have to like flip back, oh, that's right, in season 2 there was this throwaway line that they're now exploiting. And yeah, it's there's something to be
That's
said for that.
especially that's especially true in shows like some of the more drama or sci-fi shows, where there's something that was said in season 2 that didn't seem to be important, and then suddenly in season 5 it's the most important thing ever.
Right.
Yeah, but I like the idea of being able to just sit there and just binge on a certain show for a few hours. I've also thought, and I don't know why nobody has done this yet. I would love it if somebody would come up with a means by which I could essentially create my own network.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, I don't want to think about what I want to watch. I just want to know that Friends is on at 6 o'clock.
Right.
Now, it's pulling it from, HBO Max, maybe.
Sure.
Or maybe I'm watching, Expedition Unknown. It's going to pull it from Discovery Plus. But I'm essentially creating a playlist with a schedule, and it comes on at this time, on this day. So I sort of just know what's on.
Right.
And I can create and manage my own network that way. That way I don't have to think about it. I just turn it on and that's what's on. I wish that, and maybe I'm the only person who would like this, but I think it would be a really cool thing to do. So
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that seemingly everybody has a streaming station now. I don't know how to feel about that. It was bad enough when you had 3 or 4, and now seemingly everybody's got one. And at a certain point, you're paying more for streaming than you are for a cable package or a satellite package. And it's like, have we made things better or worse? Because I just don't think we can have all of them going forward. I think
no,
there's going to be
no.
some contraction. I'm very curious to see what that looks like. But
Or some packaging of them so that you get a discount if you get this grouping of them.
right, right. Well, the other part of it that's so frustrating to me is the streaming rights are still so scattered. Like, this is something that I didn't realize until my son and I were watching Simpsons, and current Simpsons episodes, I believe, are on Hulu, but all historical ones are on something else. Is it on Disney? I think Disney owns it.
Disney Plus.
So if you're in Disney Plus watching an old one, you can't watch the current season. You have to go to it, and it's a little bit like I I pay for both of them. I just want to watch Simpsons now. And I feel the same way about sports. I've got various sports packages, and it's really annoying when I have three different places to go to watch a Premier League game, and I have to kind of guess which one is on which of these three options, even though all three options are owned by the same organization. NBC owns the streaming rights in the US. They own the broadcast rights in the US. I just want to watch the Man City game. Like, I pay for it.
Right.
Just give me the Man City game. Don't make it hard for me to find it. And don't make it, why do I go here to watch it live, but I go over here to watch the replay? Like, seriously? So we
Yeah,
haven't quite gotten to that promised future yet.
I get that. I have a kind of a similar tale to tell that when I was traveling, I kept up with the various Marvel shows that were on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. Recently, all those rights have reverted back to Disney,
Okay.
but they're still on Netflix
Sure.
for now. I don't know when they're going to go or if they're good. Maybe they'll be there forever. I don't know that, but I have this feeling they're going to disappear from Netflix
Oh,
and
sure.
show up somewhere else. But in the meantime, am I going to miss out on these? And so I've
Right.
in the recent couple of weeks, I've started kind of occasionally, not binging, but occasionally trying to catch up on a few of those because I missed the last few seasons of some of them,
Right.
and just before they disappear.
Yeah,
So
well, and that's a real thing. I mean, that's part of this too that I think is frustrating for some of us is wait, you used to have this and why does it go away exactly? It's a little strange. Like HBO Max makes the big deal out of how they're doing the preview or the same time it's live in the theater, it's live on there, except it goes away after 30 days or 31 days, whatever the magic is. It's like, oh, that's a little annoying, but okay, you know,
hmm
I
I
don't know.
mean, but I can't complain. At least I'm not going to a theater.
Well, that's an
I love the
interesting
theater. I love the being in a theater. I just don't like the theater experience with a billion other people who may not
right.
enjoy it as much as I do.
Right. Well, so it's fascinating to see how theaters have evolved. I think we remember when theater seats were not particularly comfortable, and now it's a recliner that goes all the way back, and it's heated seats and massage seats, and you press a button and food shows up. It really has come a long way. But to your point, the home experience isn't that far off. These big TVs are fairly reasonably priced, and you've got your own couch and you've got your own food, and you can pause it when you want to go to the restroom. You can rewind it if you couldn't quite catch something, or you just saw it was a funny line and want to see it again. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't a huge moviegoer before. I would much prefer to watch it in my
Yeah.
basement, quite frankly.
And that's what I've been saying for years is you give me first run movies at home, I'll pay a premium to see
Right.
that. I'll pay at least as much as I'm paying to go see it in the theater.
Hmm.
But it's um I'm not around these people, and it's a shame it took a pandemic to make it
Yeah.
where it was possible.
Yeah. Well, because you always run into the person who doesn't silence their phone or they don't know how to whisper or
The
it's
people
just
who take phone calls during a movie.
yeah, humans, we have some very annoying traits to say the
I
least.
will say though, one of my most memorable experiences in a theater was back when the first Avengers movie came out.
Yeah.
I was in New York. I was right there at Times Square, and I had some time in the evening, and I thought I'm going to go see Avengers. And there is nothing at all like seeing a movie about a battle
In New York.
in New York.
Yep.
And New Yorkers, they are passionate about New York.
Yes.
And I mean, the theater was crowded, which normally would just anger me to no end, but this
Right.
actually added a dimension to the movie like I never would have expected.
Yep.
And they were passionate about New York, and they were, I mean, just cheering on the Avengers and like, yeah. And it was just they were into it like nothing else. I was just again, it's like this whole nother dimension to the movie, and you
Yep.
won't get that anywhere else, and probably for any other movie.
Right.
That movie in New York was awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I wonder how many times New York and LA have been destroyed in a movie. I mean, it's got to be hundreds, right? I mean, it's just like that's the default for almost every destruction movie you're going to see. Oh, the Hollywood sign. How many times has the Hollywood sign been destroyed?
Yeah,
It'd be
you don't see
fascinating.
Tallahassee
No,
destroyed that often in
no,
movies.
no. The Albuquerque gets left out, but
Right.
we definitely poor Hollywood sign has been destroyed 1,000 times.
Right.
Is there any show from your past that you're like, I really wish it had one more season? Just one more would have made my life complete.
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm not. I mean, there's probably lots of shows like that, but the one that came to mind first, I'll go with that one. Actually, I've got that wish a couple of times, and then, granted, the couple of times I got my wish, it wasn't that great, but it was still worthwhile.
Hmm.
Is the X Files? I just
Oh
always
yeah,
enjoyed watching that.
yeah, yeah.
And the last couple of seasons of the X Files, the ones that only came out just a few years ago, when they resurrected it, it was hit like most shows. It was hit and miss. But there was a couple of episodes that stuck out to me. Is like I still remember
Hmm.
and think about and point out to people is you got, if you don't watch anything else, watch these two. These are the best episodes ever. And I wish they just keep doing that. It doesn't have to be Fox and Fox Mulder and Dana Scully. It can,
Right.
bring in somebody else. But the idea, the whole series was very well done.
Sure, sure. That's a good point. Yeah. What's been interesting for me, is what do we show a teenager? What shows from the past do we try to expose, our children to kind of show them a little bit of, hey, this is where the cultural zeitgeist was, and here's why some of these things. Here's why Dad says this. It's from this show or whatever. And so we've been trying to run through like Friends, and it's hilarious because sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get the kid to want to sit down and watch Friends with us. But then he laughs his hiney off because there's so many good lines, and you forgot just how funny these shows actually were. But
Yeah, my oldest, she's all in. She watches Friends all the time. She's
nice,
actually the one who started us watching it again because she started watching it. So.
nice, nice. All right. Well, let's throw a few lightning round questions at you and see what kind of trouble that gets us into. So, what's your go-to meal? Your favorite meal? I mean, I know a few I've shared with you that would possibly pop into this conversation, but I'm curious, like, what's your go-to if it's celebration or you just this is what makes me feel good.
Well, I mean, it's a mix of things. I enjoy barbecue. I enjoy really good Mexican food.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm not saying this is universally true, but it's difficult to find in Colorado. Both of
Yes.
those, they do exist. I know a few places, but they're generally difficult to find. But yeah, if somebody says, "Hey, where do you want to go eat?" Um, it's going to be one of two answers coming from me. It's either going to be I want honest to goodness good Mexican food, which is a kind of a drive for me to get there because there's
Sure.
not any good ones around where I live. And then the other answer is Torchy's because I love a good
Mm.
taco.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
it's not really
sir.
Mexican food. Just to be clear, it's not Mexican food.
It's very
It
good though.
it resembles Mexican food, but it's
Right.
not.
Right. Now, I know how much you like Dr. Pepper. Tell me
Yes.
more about
Oh
Dublin
yeah,
Dr. Pepper.
it disappears.
It does. It does.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's fascinating.
Okay.
Tell me about Dublin Dr. Pepper.
It doesn't, it no longer exists.
It's
But at the time, there was a bottling plant just kind of south of the Dallas Fort Worth metro area that still had the rights to make Dr. Pepper using the traditional formula, which had pure cane sugar in it and not corn oil or
mhm,
whatever.
high fructose corn
High
syrup.
fructose corn syrup. Yeah, that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, it didn't have that, and they had the right to do that, and it was brilliant. It was wonderful because it didn't make your mouth feel all gross after you drink
Hmm.
it. It's all
Hmm.
sticky. It actually tasted sweeter.
Hmm.
It had a completely different taste to it. It was just really good. And in fact, I remember driving down there to Dublin and going to the Walmart there and loading up the back of my Camaro with Dublin Dr Pepper to take back to my apartment when I was
Nice.
living in an apartment back then, and I'd be set for months. And but yeah, a few years ago, several years ago, there was some sort of discussion about the problem. The idea was they had the right to do it as long as they maintain their distribution area.
Sure.
And the problem was is they couldn't maintain it because people would go load up their Camaro with Dr. Peppers and not take them back to their apartment.
Oh, they
You
sell them.
know, Brian Sletton told me he found them at some place in California,
Hmm.
and it's just because somehow they were making it out other places.
Sure.
They would go load them up and then go sell them elsewhere.
That's why we
And
can't have nice
so
things.
that's why we can't have nice things. And so um, Dr. Pepper essentially sued them or something. I don't remember exactly how it all sorted out, but in the end, they lost their rights to
Okay.
make Dublin Dr. Pepper. And so the Dr. Pepper company agreed to continue making that formula for a while, but even now it's still hard to find. You can occasionally still find it, but it's really difficult to find, except in certain locations.
Sure. It's a little surprising they don't make that easier because I know how many people appreciate that and would pay a premium. It's a little
Oh yeah,
surprising that that's not more commonly obtainable. But- So I asked this question knowing that Pi Day wasn't that long ago, but pie or cake?
ice cream.
Oh, good answer. Good
No, but
answer.
if I had to choose between pie and cake, it kind of depends on the pie or the cake. I don't
Okay,
like all cakes. I don't like all pies.
that's fair.
I love a good pumpkin pie. I love a
Yeah,
really good apple pie, as long as it's got to be good though.
sure.
But otherwise, usually it's cake.
Okay. Right. I'm guessing I know the answer to this given where you moved to, but oceans or mountains?
Yes,
Yes.
but I love living in the mountains. I
Hmm.
love visiting the oceans.
Fair point. My son has offered many times to donate some of our many lakes to your state in exchange for a couple of teeners. Because you guys have plenty. You wouldn't even notice
Yeah.
if we took a couple. And I'd love to put some mountains between us and some of this very cold weather. So if we could find a way to moderate, because one of the things I will appreciate about the snow you get versus the snow I get, and this is at least Scott Davis assures me this is the case. He has shoveled in shorts and a t-shirt before.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't think I've ever done that in Minnesota other than maybe in the fall or the spring, but certainly not in December, January. And our snow tends to stay once it shows up, at least until this time of year. But
Yeah, I don't know how that works in Minnesota. Here, the humidity is so low, generally speaking, that it can be 40 degrees outside, and I'll have my window open
mm,
because it's still nice. The house still stays relatively warm because when there's a high amount of humidity, the humidity not only carries heat, it carries cold as what
right.
just as effectively. And so if it's humid, the cold air is going to come in. It's going to, if you're wearing shorts and it's cold, it's going to feel cold. But here, if there's no humidity, you could go outside, and as long as it's not terribly windy, yeah, I could. Scott's right. I've shoveled snow in shorts and a t-shirt,
Yeah,
and it's nice.
the running joke I would say in Minnesota is, but it's a dry cold. And so we while we're humid in the summer, it tends to not be that way here. I would much rather have close to 0 Fahrenheit as opposed to 40 and humid. That damp cold never feels good. In the sort of the Maryland area, Virginia, where it can get super
Oh yeah,
damp. Along the coast, sometimes that can be very painful. As many times as I've been to San Francisco, it's always a bit of a surprise to me how cold it can be there, even when it's in the 60s or 70s. Because of that marine layer that always rolls in. It's
right.
definitely a different feeling than what you'd have in Colorado. And if I ever moved to Colorado, which by the way is on my short list of places I would live, I would be ruined for anywhere else because that lack of humidity in the summer is so awesome. Gets warm during the day, but then cools off so nicely at night. Oh, it's good
Yeah,
sleeping
the only
weather, as they
the
say.
only thing you got to do is you got to invest in lotion,
Yeah,
because my
it's
skin is
true.
so dry right
That's
now.
very true. Yeah, no, I actually have hand lotion next to me because if as many times as you wash your hands in the winter or during the pandemic, if your hands will crack, and that nothing feels good about dry, cracked skin.
Yeah,
But
just like last week, I had an itch on my arm. I remember when it happened. I remember like I scratched it. I didn't claw myself or anything. I just
right,
scratched it. A little
right,
later, I noticed I had like I had broken skin, and
yep,
I was just barely scratching an itch. So
yep,
yeah, it's
yep.
just
No,
really really dry.
I relate, man. I relate. Ebook versus paper book.
Generally ebook. I mean, I like the idea of it depends on the book again. I mean,
Sure.
technical books and novels and things like that. Yeah, I'm going to probably lean on the ebook for the most part.
Hmm.
But I have my background turned on so you can't see it. But right behind me, in addition to being a Disney fan, I'm also a big fan of Charles Schultz's
Oh
work.
yeah.
Minnesota.
Yes,
There's
sir.
another Minnesota connection. But I'm a big fan of his work, and I have there's the Fantagraphics published a series of books over the last several years. They're kind of done with it now because they've completed it, but it's every single Peanuts comic strip ever, and
Wow.
just by 2 years per book.
Sure.
And I have those. I would never get those in ebook. Those have to be the
Yeah.
printed book.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you know about the Snoopies, right? In Minnesota?
Oh yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen the one at the airport, of course, but
There's a lot of them.
I knew there's more. I just haven't seen them.
Sure,
And I know
sure.
there's a park in St. Paul that has quite a few,
Several.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember how long that ran, but it became a thing where corporations typically would sponsor one and then they would find some way to decorate it that had something to do with their corporate culture or, that their employees would vote on or various things like that. And then some of them are auctioned off, for charity as memory serves. And so it's always interesting to see where the Mickeys end up or
Yeah.
where the Snoopies end up after the fact.
I keep wanting to. I mean, I'm always there for like a no fluff just stuff. I show up, I speak, I leave, I go home. But I've always wanted to like have an extra day for no other reason than just go around and see all those.
we are always welcome here if you ever do spend an extra day or two in Minnesota. I am happy to have Dr. Pepper on order. While we don't have good barbecue, I'm happy to grill. So, and I've been making a lot of bread. So that's how I've been surviving the winter is by making bread. The downside of making bread is then your family starts to expect fresh bread on a regular basis, and so you kind of it's like this vicious circle. Like once you start, you can't stop without insulting somebody.
Right.
So comes the territory. But pretty sure I know the answer to this one. But DC or Marvel? You and I actually had this conversation last week, as I recall.
Yes. Marvel. I mean, as I was growing up and reading actual physical comic books, I always enjoyed the DC comics more.
Hmm.
But I didn't read a lot of comic books either. I mean, I enjoyed the ones I did, but I just didn't read a lot of them. I grew up in a small town, and actually getting your hands on a comic book was challenging enough.
Sure.
So I just didn't read a lot of them. But I enjoyed the DC more. But when it comes to watching movies and TV shows, I think Marvel's just they've nailed it.
Yeah.
There's just no comparison. Um, DC, the movies, a few of them are nice to watch, but overall, I haven't seen the Zack Snyder cut yet
I was
of
just gonna
Justice
ask.
League, but I hear it's brilliant. But the movies are just largely hit and miss and very
Hmm.
disjointed, and it's
Hmm.
been kind of disappointing. We've been spoiled by Marvel, and I
Yes.
will say though the Arrowverse. That's on CW, the Arrowverse, for considering it's on TV, considering it's probably got a much lower budget than anything in the MCU, the Arrowverse is pretty strong. It's some good writing, some decent stories, way better than anything that happens in the movie DC's movie universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's remarkable how, and I would love to know kind of the inside baseball of how they planned it out that the MCU stitched together so well. That you had these disparate movies with disparate teams, and yet it all stitched into this larger narrative. That's remarkable to be able to pull off.
Well, they
And
have one person who's basically managing, the whole kind of managing the whole storyline to make sure everything's cohesive and comes together. And when necessary, they retcon things. So I mean, they still are allowed to do that.
it does help when you can just sort of and let's just invent this and that solves that problem, and then we'll see it all syncs up because reasons. Just don't actually put the timeline together, or you'll see where we made a mistake. But it's fine.
Yeah,
It's
and
fine.
and even now, I mean, whether it's in the plans already or not, or it comes up later, maybe they haven't planned it yet, but it comes up. Without giving any spoilers, I don't necessarily think what happened in WandaVision is the end of the story. I think we're going to find out
No,
that stuff happened in that story that we just don't know about yet, and
I
it's
thought
gonna.
WandaVision was brilliant.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, the first couple episodes, you're like, what is this? What I don't wait. We're in the '60s, and then it's just like, whoa, wow, stuff just got real.
right. And I was a little. I mean, to some degree, I was a little disappointed because there's everybody had their theories of what was going to happen,
Hmm.
and the theories were way better than whatever everybody thought was going to happen, and then it turned out that what everybody thought was going to happen did happen, and it was who all along. And then there was the theories actually sounded good too. I'd like to hear more about those. And so that's why
Right,
I'm thinking I think at some point, whether it's part of the plan already or it can become part of the plan, that some of those theories will pan out. We
right.
just didn't see them over the course of the last several episodes.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out and kind of what I guess, sort of the next chapter of that MCU looks like. I have not seen Winter Soldier yet. That's on tap, but I know the first episode of that just came out, so
Yeah, I saw
hopefully
that.
that adds on to the canon. But
I saw that day one. It was good. I think
good.
it was a, don't get me wrong, totally fun watching. Great, a lot of action and everything, but it just came off this high from WandaVision,
Right.
and it was a little bit slow and not quite as
Sure.
exciting for a moment.
Sure.
I'm sure it builds up as the season progresses, but we just came off that high, and
Right. Right.
it was a
Yeah,
little bit
that
disappointing in that way.
sure. So how about action comedy or drama? What kind of
Uh,
movies do you gravitate towards?
Mostly action. I like all of them
Hmm.
to varying degrees, but the drama has to be really good to pull me in.
Sure.
Otherwise, it bores me. Um, Action, by its very nature, is exciting, so
Right.
I have to
Right.
I have to watch it. Comedy, it just depends on the comedy. I mean,
Sure.
there's some classic ones out there. Pretty much anything John Hughes did, pretty much the old '80s. Most of the comedies put out in the '80s were good. A lot of the more current comedies are just not that I have anything against this, philosophically, but it's just kind of crass for the sake of crassness. They're not funny. They're just crass.
Right. Right.
And so they think they're being funny, and apparently there's some audience who thinks they're funny, but that audience does not include me. So it's
Sure.
difficult for me to watch.
Well, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I've found over the last year, I've been much more drawn towards action and comedy just because drama feels like we've got enough of that. Like Christine and I wrapped up Better Call Saul, which is fantastic, and I love that universe. I loved Breaking Bad, but there's so many scenes where you're just like, oh, I know something bad's gonna happen, and I just don't want bad things to happen right now because there's been so many bad things that have been happening in seemingly the last year. I just want something like Ted Lasso to take my mind off of all of this
Right.
and just make me laugh and give me that good, warm, fuzzy feeling because there seems like there's enough of that in the real world that I don't want to add that into my escapism time. But
Yeah, I get that. That's why you should watch Series of Unfortunate Events.
all right, all right, I'll add it to
It's
my list.
bad things happen, but bad things are still amusing while they happen. So
Sure, sure,
I wouldn't say it's a comedy by any means, but there's funny bits in it.
nice,
And you can't have a show that has Patrick Warburton narrating and it not be somewhat funny. So
nice. Well, let's switch gears here as we wrap up. I know in addition to your next version of your highly acclaimed Spring Book, you are working on some Alexa skills and conversational UIs and things of that nature. What pulled you into that space? How did you decide to play around there?
well, I mean, in hindsight, I kind of wondered why I didn't get into it sooner,
Sure.
because I approach most technologies with this mindset of how does this make my life more like Star Trek, and that definitely does. In fact, even the Amazon engineers, they'll tell you that their inspiration is the computer on the Enterprise.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
they'll explicitly tell you that, and so how I didn't get drawn into it sooner, I do not know. But a few years ago, I was sitting around and I saw this invitation to join this that Amazon put out to join this. I wouldn't say it's not really a hackathon. It was just sort of a coding challenge. They said,
Yeah.
put together, build a skill, use one of our templates. We have some predefined templates. Just use one of our templates as a starting point and build a skill. And it doesn't matter what the skill does. Doesn't matter if it's awesome or not. It doesn't, we're not judging them. Just build a skill, publish the skill. And if you're one of the first 500 or so that publish within this month, we'll send you a free Echo Dot. Now, I didn't know if I wanted to write Alexa skills or not, but I don't mind free hardware,
Right.
you know? And so I thought, sure, I'll try it. I had some time on my hands one night and I gave it a shot. And I really, really enjoyed the experience, even though back then what they call the Alexa Skills Kit, their SDK, sucked big time. It was
Hmm.
horrible back then, but I still enjoyed the experience. And I definitely got an Echo Dot out of it. And that was cool.
Nice.
And then next thing I know is I realized, I enjoy having an Echo Dot, but it'd be really cool if I had it in this other room too. And before long, I mean, they sent me a free Echo Dot, yes, but they made more money off of me in the long
Right.
run because I'm
Right.
bought other hardware as well. And it wasn't too long after that they said, "Hey, we have another one, and this another challenge. And this time, the only requirement is that you build it for devices that have a screen on them, like the Echo Show." I'm like, well, heck yeah. And we'll send you a free Echo Show. I'm like, well, heck yeah. So I signed up for it. I did it. In fact, I need to do some work on it to kind of update it because it's
Sure.
kind of half broken right now. But the no fluff just stuff skill is that skill I created,
Oh, nice. I didn't know
and
that.
it yeah. And so they sent me at the time it was the Echo Show. It's not the new one. It's the second generation Echo Show. It's like a
Cool.
$250 piece of hardware, and they
Yeah.
sent it to me, it's sitting in another room right now. I have an Echo Show 8 to my right here that I keep looking at to make sure that it doesn't wake up when I say Alexa.
I
But
know.
I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And the SDK has changed dramatically since then. They really did an overhaul between the version 1 and version 2. Version 2 is so much more enjoyable to work with now. And so I thought, well, hey, I could write a book about this. And so I started working on it and worked out. It's gone well. The only thing that has been both exciting and disappointing at the same time is that I've somehow hitched my wagon to two technologies that are evolving at rapid pace,
Right.
Spring and Alexa. And by the time you get done with the Spring book, it's already you've missed
Time to
some
re
new
up.
thing they've got. Yeah, and the same thing's happening already. I pretty much had finished writing all but little tidying up bits. I finished writing the Alexa book last summer, like, July, August time period. But what happened is on July 20th, they announced 31 new features. And I spent the better part of about a week going through
Yeah.
those list of features and saying, okay, which one of these should I include in the book? And
Right.
so I picked a handful of the obvious ones, but then there's this new thing called Alexa Conversations, which is just freaky awesome. It kind of employs a little bit of AI, a little bit of machine learning, and then it makes it where you can actually have a fairly natural conversation with Alexa in the course of trying to achieve some goal. Whether it's
Sure.
ordering pizza or whatever it is you're doing, the conversation is fairly natural, and she's able, because of the way that the AI is employed, she's able to kind of somewhat anticipate where you're headed with this and sort
Right.
of guide the conversation
Chain
appropriately.
things together.
Yeah, and even if you change your mind, if you gave her an answer and you said, "Oh wait, no, make that this instead," she understands that you changed your mind and she
Right.
needs to go change what happened before, and it just wasn't possible to do that before. And it's really awesome. The problem with it is that, and the reason I still haven't finished the book, is because the only way to do that was with their developer console. It's like a web-based set of forms that itself I could complain about all day long because the
Right.
UI on it's just it's good for what they did, but it's just, there's, from a developer standpoint, it's kind of a pain to work with.
Sure.
And so if I'm like, I have to include it in the book, but I also have to do this stupid thing I don't like doing to get there. And so I fought with it. And so it was like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I can't remember what date it was. I spent the entire weekend focused on nothing but that. I had 53 screenshots of the developer console because that's the only way I could describe it, is by using
Right.
screenshots. There's not a lot of code. I have to show these screenshots. I had 53 screenshots.
Wow.
And some of them need to be cropped a little or maybe even ditched
Sure.
altogether. But I went through the process of building a skill from start to finish and captured 53 screenshots along the way. I wrote most of the prose around it. I was about 90% finished with that weekend. The next day,
Oh,
they announced this thing called the Alexa Conversations Definition Language, or ACDL, which lets me do everything I just described in 53 screenshots. I can do it in about 50 lines of this custom language they have.
checks out.
It's kind of a C Java like
Sure.
syntax, but it's more declarative than it is imperative or OO or anything like that.
Right.
It is reminiscent of C, and in fact, it looks a lot like C sharp in a lot of ways. But so yeah, I basically scrapped that file and started over, and so I'm almost finished with it again.
Awesome.
Thankfully. But yeah, I'm going to step away. I'm going to let them publish it, because what
Yeah.
I've also, it occurred to me, they have this event every year in the summer, and
Right.
they're about to probably unleash another
Right.
30 or so
You
new
got to
things
ship
that
it. Just ship it.
yeah, I got to ship it before, and that's another edition maybe.
Right. Right. Exactly. It gives you something for edition 2, edition 3, etc. Because that's definitely your bread and butter.
Yeah. But it's cool stuff. It's fun. It's literally, and I've done all sorts of different things in my career that I've enjoyed not every project. I'm not going to lie to you, but I've
Yeah.
enjoyed most projects I've been on to some degree. And there's a certain geeky aspect to a lot of them that I can really sink my teeth into. But this one's fun at a whole different level. It's a completely different kind of fun. It just I definitely just love sitting down and just writing skills and trying new things. And it's also cool because friends, family, neighbors, they can relate to what it is. They don't
Yep.
understand what a Kubernetes cluster is, but they kind of
Right.
get,
Right.
I can talk to an app on my Alexa device. They
Yeah.
get that. So
I think these, I had this conversation with Scott Davis before, but I think these spoken UIs, if you will, these spoken interfaces are very powerful and very useful. It's amazing to me how many things I've asked my phone to do or my watch. Timers is a perfect example of that. I do this all the time. In fact, my son just did this the other day. Christine and I were running an errand, and we said, "Hey, while we're gone, we need you to put the towels in the dryer." And so he looked at his phone and said, set a timer for 25 minutes. And I do that constantly. Those are the kind of things that, well, yeah, you can do it other ways, but it's so natural to just ask for something like that. And it's amazing how far that's already
mhm.
progressed in just the few short years that's been the norm. And I'm very intrigued to see what this looks like in 5 or 10 years and just how
Oh,
natural
totally.
that becomes. And the thing that amazes me is how wide a swath of people I see using that technique. Everything from people are kids age all the way up to some of my golf buddies that are retired guys. I see them do that all the time. Ask their phone, when's the rain going to start, or send an email or send a text. It's amazing to me how often that stuff is happening.
Yeah, sure. And well, first off, if anyone's interested in this, I like to paraphrase something that Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he's on Shark Tank, all around rich nerd. Something that Mark Cuban said in an interview, I guess it's been almost 2 years now. He says, if you want to get into it, now's a great time to get into it because the technology is there that you can achieve great things. Again, I'm
Right.
paraphrasing what he said, but
Right.
the technology is there where you can achieve pretty cool things, but it's not so ubiquitous that people expect you to achieve great things. And
Sure.
so you have a little wiggle room to screw up
Right.
and get to know it before it becomes where it's sort of necessary. And he also said that there is no future that doesn't have ambient computing or voice activation. The cat's out of the
Agreed.
bag. We're doing this now. This is a thing. And you keep talking now. I'm interested in voice generally, not just Alexa. Now granted, I have more Alexa devices than I have anything else.
Sure.
But I'm also interested in Google Assistant. I really want to like Siri, but I struggle a little bit with the programming, the developer experience with Siri. But I definitely, I'm interested in the technology more than I am a specific brand. But again, I focus on Alexa as much as I can. But with that regard, you keep talking about talking to a phone. And yeah, I do that too. I ask Siri all the time to set a timer for various reasons because that's convenient.
Right.
Let me show you what else you can do. This right here
Oh yeah.
on my finger,
Yeah.
that's an Alexa device. You don't have to say her name, but there's a button I can hit with my thumb here, and then I can
Sure.
talk to it and then listen to it. And there's
Nice.
some really cool things you can do with that. Now, I just learned over the weekend that they've discontinued this product. It was
Okay.
kind of an experimental type thing, what they call
Sure.
a day one issue or something. I can't remember what they call it, but I got one as soon as I could, and it's really cool. I love having it, and I've got some ideas for what you can do and skills that they may be useful on a desktop, but there's something about carrying Alexa with you where you can ask those
Mm,
questions. And so they've discontinued this, but they have other products that are also just as mobile. Like they have the Echo frames if you wear
sure.
eyeglasses. They have,
Sure.
in fact, they're in their second version of those now. What else was there? There's another one that um, currently is on. I can't remember what it's called now. It's currently unavailable, but I'm expecting it to make the ear pods.
Yeah.
They're the Echo Buds. They're basically like AirPods, but they're Alexa enabled.
Sure.
And the idea of having something where you're actually not sitting at a desk, you're not on your Fire Stick, you're not, whatever, you're not tethered to something that's plugged into the wall, but you're actually out and about. You're at the grocery store, you're at Disney World, and you want to ask a question like, I don't know, what's the wait time for Pirates of the Caribbean? Yeah,
Absolutely.
I could reach in my pocket and pull a phone out, but I could also just ask it.
Right.
That's faster. I don't have to
Right.
worry about dropping my phone or anything like that. And incidentally, I do have a skill that does that. I haven't I haven't published it yet. I still got a
Yep.
little bit of polishing to do on it, but yeah, I have a skill where I can ask it what the wait time is for any of the attractions in Disney World or Disneyland, and on this thing, and it'll tell me with real time data. It's pretty awesome.
That is amazing. What this is a rough transition again, but what is your favorite ride at the parks?
Ah, yeah, there's a lot of them that I enjoy, and
Yeah.
certainly I go back to Tower of Terror as being the one that sort of enlightened me about there's a story and you're in it. But I
Hmm.
think my favorite one, if I'm being honest, is not a thrill ride. It's pretty easygoing as things go. I enjoy the Haunted Mansion,
Oh, sure.
especially the Disneyland version, because it's slightly different.
Sure.
But the main reason I enjoy it so much is because there's just so much detail in there. I swear, every time I write it, there's something I didn't see before, and it's just really rich and so many layers to it. And then, of course, during the holiday season between Halloween and Christmas, they overlay it with Nightmare Before Christmas, which gives you a
Yep.
whole nother dimension to
Yep.
appreciating that ride. So
Sure.
it's easily one of my favorites just because of the richness of it.
Nice. Well,
I also like the
fantastic.
Jungle Cruise,
Yeah.
mostly because I keep thinking that if I had some other job that wasn't in software development, I want to be a Jungle Cruise skipper. I pretty much know all the jokes now, so
Yeah.
I can
I was
probably do
gonna
it.
say I think that would be interesting, except it's got to be a little repetitious and monotonous.
Yes, that's in fact that's the more or less the subject behind one of Weird Al's songs, Skipper Dan. It's
Yeah.
about the Jungle Cruise,
Yeah,
and,
and
and and it being repetitious.
I believe we are going to get a movie out of that, aren't we? Out of the Jungle
Yeah,
Cruise,
the movie I
which
think has been made. I
I
don't know
think
why it's not been
so.
released yet. They're not re-theming the ride, or at least they're claiming they're not yet, but they are
Okay,
redoing a large portion of the ride to correct some of the not so politically correct sections of the ride,
probably
and make the
smart.
and also add more of a cohesive story behind it. So
Sure.
there is a story being told. It's a story. What I found, I've actually read about some of the story last week, and I thought it was interesting to me for two reasons. First off, the main character in the story is someone named Alberta Falls, whose name you might know if you've ever talked about. You go on the ride and they talk about Albert Falls,
Hmm.
which is it's a waterfall, Albert Falls, named after the world famous explorer Dr. Albert Falls. But Alberta Falls is his granddaughter,
Oh,
and
sure.
if you ever eat at the Skipper Canteen restaurant in Disney World, it's supposedly she's the proprietor
Ah,
of the
checks
restaurant
out.
there. Which, by the way, has I'm not going to go into it any more than saying this. If you ever go there, there's a library there that has some fascinating titles on the
Ah,
books in there.
okay.
I have spent a good 10, 15 minutes in there just reading the titles of the books
Sure.
in there because they're funny. They're hilarious, all sorts of puns and stuff. But anyway, yeah, they're redoing the ride, giving it a few more backstory. But the big backstory is that supposedly Albert Falls was a member of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers,
Okay.
which is a thing that they've been sort of doing for several years at Disney parks all over the world, not just in the United States. There's different characters associated with rides that are members of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. And if you didn't know that, you didn't know that. That's the
Sure.
problem, is they haven't really milked it that much.
Sure.
But I saw that Albert Falls supposedly is a member of SEA,
Checks
and
out.
so I'm hoping that they start making a bigger deal about it, because I think there's something really cool about certainly having a ride that based on Frozen, that's some Disney IP, but that's neat and all. But having a ride like the Haunted Mansion that is not based on some movie but has its own story
Right.
is really cool. I love
Right.
the idea of having the park tell stories that you've not heard before,
Right. Right.
and I'm hoping they exploit the SEA some more.
Oh, sure. Sure. Well, very cool. Well, Craig, I could keep talking to you for an hour, but I'm
Oh
sure
yeah,
you have better things to do than just hang out with me on a Zoom call. So I think we'll declare victory. It was great catching up with you. I can't wait to run into you in the real world, hopefully sometime in the relatively near future. Maybe that'll
yes.
be at one of the Disney parks. Again, I think we've started kind of having those conversations. I too would like to make that. I don't know if it's an annual thing for us. I'm not quite sure I can convince my teenager of that, but I would definitely enjoy the heck out of being there over the holidays, and I would love to do it again in a post-pandemic world. So fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
you can raise them right, but they still are going to stray. So I'm sorry.
Truth to that. It's a real treat to have teenagers around the house, isn't
Yes, yes.
it?
All the drama.
Oh yeah, yeah, drama. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's great being a parent most of the time. Most of the time. But all right, my friend. Well, thank you so much. I very much appreciate your time. I look forward to hanging out with you in the future. We will be back next week with one of the people behind DevNexus and other amazing conferences. Vincent will be with us, and we'll see what kind of trouble that gets us into. I'm sure he and I'll talk about food and how he ended up here of all places, but and what's it like to organize a conference. I think people don't give that as much credit as it's due. But thank you again, Craig. I really appreciate your time, and
And thank
I
you.
very much look forward to seeing you in the real world, my friend. Cheers.
Indeed.